We'll give everybody, let me try that again. We will give everybody about 10 more minutes to get in. I'd like to start this on time, but I know that people would like to join right at the start of the training. So we'll give them a few minutes to get in and then we'll get started and we'll keep the time. I don't believe in holding everybody late. So if they're late, they get to be late. While we're waiting to get started, if you'd like, go ahead and put where you're from in the chat. I know that we have some people from Florida. We have some people from other parts of the United States. Interesting to see what countries, if there's any other countries coming from outside the United States. Texas, Colorado, America. Thanks, Captain. Turkey, really? Uh, that should be an interesting conversation. Oregon, Brazil. There we go. Texas, North Korea, Michigan, we'll start in about 6 minutes. Oh, Arizona. Bob, are you back in Australia? Thank you. What time is it there, Bob? 1 p.m. in Australia. Well, thank you for coming. Enjoy your lunch. Actually, Mark, I haven't personally heard from any CERT members in Turkey or who have gone to Turkey to help out. Um, maybe maybe Captain Gates or Captain Gross has heard from anyone. Captain Gates, if you have, or Captain Gross, if you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you. Go ahead and start in 3 minutes. And this is live streamed to our YouTube channel. As soon as it's over, it will be available for replay. So if you have to leave early or you lose connection, can't get back in, or you know anybody who you want to have join, they can join after, watch it on YouTube, and it'll be available for immediate replay. And then we'll get it edited and cleaned up. So then it'll be on our channel normally after that.
Just testing the sound.
We can hear you loud and clear, Cap.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we'll get started in 2 minutes. Paul, it's great to see you on. I've been doing well, aside from a little wet vacuuming of my basement this morning. It rained pretty hard overnight. I know the estimates were that was going to be 1 to 3 inches of rain. Um, Ventura County was supposed to get 4+ inches of rain, so we got quite a bit of rain overnight. If you want to search for the YouTube channel, it is if you search for LAFD CERT, you'll find it. LAFD CERT Coordinators is the channel, and I can post it in the chat as well. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Potts Forbes. I am the LAFD CERT Central Bureau Coordinator, and I'd like to thank everyone for taking a couple hours of your precious time to join us for this tonight. Every third Wednesday night of the month, we host a continuing education training that is open to the general public. We go over topics such as, in the case of tonight, can the Turkey-Syria earthquake happen in Los Angeles? We go over topics, continuing topics for the community emergency response team, over triage, how to use radios, how to organize your neighborhood. And these topics are always open to anyone, anywhere who wants to join. We're not an exclusive club, and we always welcome the general public to attend. Tonight, we have a special panel. I can get the chat work there. Special speaker panel tonight. Our guest speaker tonight is going to be Mark Benton, who is the Director of Communication, Education, and Outreach for Southern California Earthquake Center out of USC. We have Captain Rico Gross, Disaster Preparedness Officer for the Los Angeles Fire Department, and Crisanta Gonzalez, who is the Community Preparedness and Engagement Division Chief of the City of Los Angeles Emergency Management Department. And then I will be speaking about how the community can get trained and prepared and organized to respond within our own neighborhoods. Our special guest speaker tonight has been working on increasing earthquake and tsunami awareness to reduce loss in the community. He's also the executive director of the Earthquake Country Alliance, which organizes the Great California Shakeout Earthquake Drill every year. And he was recognized as the White House Champion of Change, expanding shakeout drills worldwide, which have involved more than 68 million people worldwide. You can see that I read this before I started talking about it. But without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Mark Benton. Mark?
Thank you very much, and hi everyone. Really great to be with you and to share some kind of information about what we know about earthquakes here in California. And as you can see, we get right to the point. Yes, it can happen here. So I'm going to kind of go over what we know, what has happened, what can happen, and what happened in Turkey, and kind of the comparison of them all. And is anybody else hearing the sound okay or an issue? Saw a chat.
You sound good to me. I had to turn my volume up a little bit though. I don't know if you can speak louder.
Okay. Do something for that. All right, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about what you can do about those earthquakes to be better prepared to survive and recover. All right, so I'm going to have a little bit more science than often what I do in a public presentation, but it's kind of needed to compare the earthquakes, and then I'm going to have a bit of safety as well. So if we look at the Earth, kind of stretched out, and some of it's duplicated here, but you really can kind of see how the pattern of earthquakes over the last 100 years or so, probably even less, is visible. And you see that earthquakes are happening in clusters in different places. And many of you probably know that that's because the earth is divided, the earth's crust is divided into large plates we call tectonic plates. They're moving around past each other underneath and even pushing together. And we are on here in California, we're on a plate boundary between the Pacific plate and the North American plate. And that, of course, we all know and love our faults. And the San Andreas fault in particular, world famous, is takes up most of that plate boundary motion. It is trying to move past each other. The plates are trying to move at about the rate your fingernails grow, about 2.5 inches a year, but is locked along the fault. And in fact, the San Andreas fault itself in Southern California really has very few earthquakes, even small ones. And the last major earthquake it had was in 1857, a 7.9 earthquake, very similar to the size of the main shock, the first earthquake that happened on February 6th in Turkey. So part of what complicates things in Southern California is that fault bends. And because of the bend of the San Andreas fault, many other large faults and many, many more smaller faults have been created, kind of like you get your windshield cracked and then more and more little cracks keep happening. And so if we see the San Andreas coming down through the region, the southern end is near the Salton Sea. It kind of divides into other different types of faults and goes down into the Gulf of California. And that keeps going up north, of course, all the way up through the San Francisco Bay Area. Of course, that was the source of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, about a 7.8 as well. The last big earthquake that happened, like I mentioned, was in 1857. And it started in Central California and ruptured down to about the Cajon Pass near north of San Bernardino. But the part further south than that is what we remain concerned about, as it hasn't had a big earthquake since 1700. But you can see there are more than 300 active faults that can have a magnitude 6 or greater. A magnitude 6, where there's lots of people, would cause damage. A 6.7 is a good size bigger than that, like we had with the Northridge earthquake, as I'll talk about in a moment. We actually have 30 earthquakes every day in Southern California, but most are too small to be felt by people. Our instruments pick them up, and it helps to kind of identify kind of what's happening on a very small scale, may indicate one day what may happen at the larger earthquake. Some people ask, oh, if we had enough small earthquakes, would we then not have to have the big ones? Kinda, but we'd have to have millions right in the perfect places, even like a magnitude 3, to not have to release enough strain in the earth to not have a very large earthquake. And it's just really not feasible for everything to line up perfectly like that. So we're going to have lots of small earthquakes. We're going to have some moderate earthquakes, and we're going to have a few larger damaging earthquakes. You know, we seem to have every 10 to 20 years in the region, not in the same place. But of course, one of the most damaging earthquakes in U.S. history was back in 1994. We're coming up on the 30th anniversary. A magnitude 6.7 earthquake that was beneath the San Fernando Valley shook the entire area. This is a shake map showing the pattern of shaking intensity. So it was a 6.7, but felt many all over the region in many different ways. If you were in the San Fernando Valley, you probably felt the level of shaking that will be about as much as you'll ever feel, intensity-wise. If you were down in Irvine, it wasn't as strong. If you were in Northridge, you may have felt shaking for 15 to 20 seconds the farther away you go. The waves kind of spread out. You might feel it for even longer. but not as intense. And these are some key aspects of understanding that magnitude is one number for everywhere. It's kind of like total amount of rain for the entire region, whereas you might have different levels of rain in different places. So you'd have to kind of think of that in different ways. The most recent large earthquake in Southern California was back in 2019, well north of Los Angeles. And so you even see that the intensity of shaking was quite weak, though was felt by many people. I happened to be in Toronto, Canada at the time, so I missed it. But this was not the largest, or sorry, this was the larger earthquake of two. And this is kind of key to one aspect with the Turkey earthquake, is that you can have large earthquakes happening together. Usually the first one's the largest, and then there's a smaller second one, of course, in aftershocks. In this case, on July 4th, there was a magnitude 6.4 in that same area. And then the next day, a magnitude 7.1. So that can happen as well. But as you see here in most of the very highly populated parts of Southern California, the shaking was weak. You may have felt a rolling motion come through, not the high intensity that you're going to feel in the areas of yellow and red, higher, usually closer to the location of the rupturing fault. So I'm seeing people about they're still being double talking. Is that an issue, or should I continue?
You sound fine to me. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. There may be on sound setting on your end. Sorry about that. So Turkey is also on actually plate boundaries, multiple plate boundaries. It's much more complicated area over there, and this animation or drawing kind of shows that this is Turkey. There's a North Anatolian fault and an East Anatolian fault that connects into others, comes down into and connects into the Dead Sea fault. And what's basically happening is that the African plate, most of Africa, and Arabia plate, which is mostly Saudi Arabia and other countries, are trying to push north towards the Eurasian plate. And much of Turkey is effectively being kind of squeezed to the west. There's arrows here showing the motion. And this northern fault has had a series of earthquakes greater than magnitude 7 in the last century, kind of one after another, kind of heading along the fault. The last being in 1999, a magnitude 7.6, not far from Istanbul, that killed 17,000 people. The East Anatolian fault it kind of builds up less strain over time. It's moving slower and has less frequent earthquakes, the last being a magnitude 6.7 in 2020 before what's happened this year. So less frequent can mean it's building up strain, and that can be released as has happened here. Okay, so that's one view of this. The other is, and you can see on here, there are two stars, and one being the magnitude 7.8 first earthquake that was followed. Actually, there was a magnitude 6.7 and then also a magnitude 7.5, really on another fault nearby. And that's a key thing to know about our faults in Southern California, is that, remember, we have so many faults. So you can have an earthquake on one that will trigger an earthquake on another. And that really can happen at any time too. So if we kind of look at the history of earthquakes, you can see kind of lining up on these plate boundaries. There have been earthquakes in this area. These are just kind of among the largest that have happened in our time where we've been able to record earthquakes. Okay, so on February 6th, on the southwestern East Anatolian Fault, rupturing for about 190 miles, very similar to what might happen on the southern San Andreas. 7.8, very similar to the shakeout scenario from 2008. 4:17 a.m. If you remember the Northridge earthquake, very similar time, that was at 4:31. Of course, earthquakes can happen at any time of the day. We We've had many that have happened in the morning, but we have had large earthquakes at different times. In fact, the Ridgecrest earthquake happened in the around in the evening, around 9 p.m. or so. The fault took about 75 seconds for it to rupture. It started in the middle and kind of ruptured both ways, and shaking could have been felt for longer in many places. Now, I'm not going to get into the damage it caused. I think we've all seen a lot of the pictures. I don't need to remind you of, the toll this has had throughout the region, not just in Turkey, but as you can see in Syria also. Buildings that have been built over, many, many years, some old, some new. And as we've seen that and heard, some of even the newer buildings not built to the best standards as possible for a variety of economic pressure reasons, and the need for housing, all similar issues as we have here with trying to require older buildings to be retrofitted, hospitals to be retrofitted. Very expensive to do, the bigger and more complicated the building, and requests for delaying the requirements. So not unlike what happened there is happening here, and we need to all be mindful of what can happen. There was legislation passed by the state to provide many millions of dollars to retrofit some of our most vulnerable apartment type buildings that are up on stilts with parking one space or two underneath. And that's been put on hold because of our budget deficit. And there's a campaign to keep that in there because of the importance of having retrofitting. So just wanted to pause to mention, what can happen because of these earthquakes may not happen to the degree here in terms of our more modern buildings and the way that they've been designed and implemented, but the types of earthquakes can, and we really will need to see what the type of damage would be. It really, really depends on exactly where the earthquakes happen. So I mentioned aftershocks, and I try to kind of make these at the same scale because the maps themselves that the U.S. Geological Survey makes kind of tries to zoom in. But this is a 6.7 aftershock of the 7.8. And a 6.7, of course, that's the size of the Northridge earthquake. And the 7.8 is the size of that shakeout scenario that was developed back in 2008. And 6.7 is 56 times smaller than a 7.8 in terms of the overall energy release. Each unit you go up 32 times the energy, the total energy release. If you go up 2 times, like from a 5 to a 7, it's 32 times 32, not plus. So that's about 1,000 times the energy from a 5 to a 7. From a 3 to a 7, it's 1,000 times 1,000. It's 1,000,000 times bigger. So that's why having many smaller 3.0s, you have to have 1,000,000 or more really, and they have to be perfectly in the right place and all kind of at once. It just won't happen. The earthquake was followed by a 7.5 magnitude earthquake on a different fault, but very nearby, kind of adjacent. And that is similar to some of the kind of connections and adjacent faults that we have here in Southern California. All right. So what is now called the Kahramanmaraş earthquake sequence combined all of these and many earthquakes. And this is a animation of all of the aftershocks up to a certain date. So I'm going to play that. You can see that right off the bat. Oh, and I'll pause for a second. What you're seeing here is where the earthquakes and the aftershocks, of course, all of them are different levels of our earthquakes, where they're happening. The orange is the initial sequence. And then the what you're seeing in blue is the 7.5 and its additional earthquakes. So somewhere in here, there's the larger earthquakes and then all the small ones. And what you see here is lined up in time. So here's day 0, day 5, day 10, and the magnitude. So at day 0, you have that 7.8 and the 6.7 and a bunch of little ones. And then now we're on probably day one, and we haven't had quite gotten the next day, but it's about to pop here. Here's the magnitude 7.5 and its series of aftershocks. And as you can see, they're on kind of a different fault, but very much in the same region. Everybody would have felt those as well. So I'm going to let this play, and you can see how, just over the first 15 days, how earthquakes keep happening. And now all the ones after the 7.5 are colored blue. So they're not necessarily connected to that 7.5. They're really, everything's connected.
Was
And once
the
you have a larger
7.5 sorry, was the 7.5 considered an aftershock or a completely separate earthquake?
It's a good question. It is an aftershock for sure. Anything within the rupture length, that's 190 miles or so, kind of in a circle of that radius around the epicenter, is kind of considered in the aftershock region. You can have more distant earthquakes that are merely considered more of a triggered earthquake. And one analogy back to 1992, there was the Landers earthquake, June 28th, 1992, followed it out in the desert north of Joshua Tree. That was followed a few hours later by the Big Bear earthquake, about a magnitude 6, that was on a different fault, but not too far away. It's really considered an aftershock, but it's really just kind of how we name these aftershocks, main shocks, triggered earthquakes. It's just for the understanding of their differences and where they are, but really, especially this close in time. If it had been, maybe a year from now, we might consider it kind of a new sequence. A good question. Okay. Thanks for asking that, Patrick, from the or in the chat, and then voice. So when we're looking at California over the last few decades, we've really been improving our understanding of our fault system, the accuracy of the understanding. We knew where there were faults, but our kind of a real good modeling for what is happening, as you can see, has really expanded in even just recent years, and our understanding of the likelihood of earthquakes on these faults. So as you can see, the highest likelihood in red along the San Andreas and other major faults, some of these much lower likelihood. And this has been a study that we're actually working on an update to this, the kind of the likelihood of earthquakes. And it's really a fault rupture happening, meaning on every kind of little grid of this map, what's the likelihood of a fault rupturing through that kind of that grid point. And what we end up with is a general understanding of, in any 30-year time period, not in the next 30 years, but just a generic 30-year time period, the probabilities of earthquakes. We're working on the ability to have a kind of more specific to our time. And if one earthquake happens, it changes everything and changes that. So there's a lot of work being done in that. But this is really looking at just the general chance of a big earthquake. Now, along with the study was the chance of a magnitude 6.7 earthquake happening in 30 years. And we've had those. We've had the Ridgecrest type earthquakes. We've had earthquakes just south of the border. It's about a 99% chance that in any 30-year period of California, there will be a 6.7 earthquake or more of them, as we've had. Now, the southern San Andreas, as I was mentioning earlier, is where we're most the location that is most likely to have an earthquake, about a 60% chance. And that, again, I mentioned that this part kind of from San Bernardino down to the Salton Sea has not had an earthquake on rupture it since 1700. And yet in our studies of kind of in the past, by digging trenches across the surface of the fault, how it's offset sediments, we can see that generally it has had earthquakes there every 150 years or so on average. So
That means sometimes it's longer, sometimes shorter. We may just be in a longer stretch here. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen really immediately, but it really can. And that was why it was chosen for the understanding of a big study led by Dr. Lucy Jones in 2008. The shakeout scenario became the basis of the great initial Southern California shakeout earthquake drill, but very similar to what's happened in earthquake, of course, in Turkey, of course. Similar, exact same magnitude, similar rupture length, maybe shaking a little bit longer. That there's a variety of factors that determine how long it takes to rupture along the fault. Perhaps shaking it for over 2 minutes in many places. And notable here compared to the shake map for the Turkey earthquake, which I'm going to scan back to you quickly. If you notice here, the shaking is really close to one couple more back here, a little bit bigger. It's really right along the fault. It's kind of like an extended bullseye along the fault here. But if we look at the situation for Southern California, you see it's not just right along the fault. In fact, there's areas of severe shaking that come further away into the LA Orange County Basin area, even up into Kern County and into the Antelope Valley. And that's because of what we all know and call the LA Basin, our valleys, the Great Valley. These are areas that have been filled in with sediment eroding off the mountains and are now big bowls of jello that of sorts that as the shaking comes in will shake for longer and kind of even amplify the shaking. So that's why we're seeing shaking that far away from the fault. This particular way of this fault rupturing starting at the south and moving to the north is was chosen to have this because it would have affect the most people in the region. This earthquake could start in the north, go to the south, could start in the middle and split both ways. And the particular pattern of shaking and losses would be different. Just to compare to the Ridgecrest earthquake and the Northridge earthquake, you could see almost if you took this Northridge earthquake and copied it 56 times, as I said, you would kind of get that similar area. The big difference is the level, not just the level of shaking intensity, but the duration. I mentioned Northridge lasting about 15 seconds. The shaking will last a lot longer. Okay, to show that, this is a really great video you may have not seen before. On the left, we're seeing a satellite image of the waves propagating away from the fault. And the blue wave is what's called the P wave. It's a very fast wave you'll feel as a sharp jolt. It's really wave that are coming kind of as it comes towards you, it's kind of going back and forth in the direction of the motion that it's coming towards you in. Whereas the yellow and orange are the S waves and surface waves and others that are really the larger waves moving back and forth. And what's anticipated is in some places, the motion will be 6 feet back and forth in 1 second. And imagine your whole house at the foundation moving back and forth 6 feet every second for a while. Everything inside, if hopefully your house is properly bolted to its foundation and secure, it will move with the ground, but everything inside is going to be flying around unless you have it secure. Everything, nothing too heavy to not be thrown in this type of earthquake. We can see it's been about 60 seconds, a little bit less than the stronger waves that started to come in. And this is a kind of a view I should have said from here's LAX, Marina del Rey, kind of downtown. And while the shaking intensity here, the back and forth is exaggerated, so we can kind of see it from this high up. At the ground level, this kind of sloshing around is what you're going to see from this large earthquake. So you can go to shakeup.org/scenario and find many other locations around the region where this type of map has been made. And you can see on the side here, it's kind of left behind the most intense patterns of shaking. And again, you can see how the waves have come into through our valley system into the LA basin and still very intense shaking. The total kind of damage as a result in the shakeout scenario is having, and this is from 2008. So at least 300,000 buildings significantly damaged. That's 10% of their value. So it's not a collapse, but it's enough that it would be costly and expensive to repair. Widespread infrastructure damage, our water and power being out. Many large fires, many perhaps more than the number of fire engines in the region and many of these start as small little fires that if people had fire extinguishers, they could have put out. Billions and hundreds of billions of dollars in overall losses, many people not being able to live at home, many people injured to the point requiring hospitalization. That's what this 50,000 injuries is. And now you might expect a big one like this, the number of deaths to be higher. In the scenario, this 1,800 was an estimate, of course, but qualified in that it could be more depending on the types of buildings and where and location, if there was a significant collapse of the building with many people in it. There was studies for what likely could happen in terms of aftershocks in this earthquake. And this is kind of a colored map where the more earthquakes you have, like more aftershocks, the more red you're going to get. And you can see at these distance locations, this is a model, so this isn't a prediction per se, like this will happen, but this is just showing kind of one possible scenario where you could have a triggered earthquake up by Mammoth area or so, in Nevada, even off the coast, and a lot of them right along the fault. The brighter and redder they are, the more big earthquakes have happened, and also because they then have many aftershocks. Again, we have 300 active faults. You have faults like the San Andreas and the San Jacinto right next to each other. Studies have shown that those could certainly have an earthquake sequence, just like we've had just recently in Turkey. There's earthquakes, of course, faults right underneath Los Angeles, the Newport Inglewood, the Puente Hills fault, all of these very close to each other and can have large earthquakes, 7.5, possibly greater, depending on how they all connect to each other, and have aftershocks that follow. And of course, even the San Andreas scenario is, for the city of Los Angeles, somewhat kind of far away. We had lots of time for notification and through the earthquake early warning system, less shaking than if we were in San Bernardino, Palm Springs, right next to the fault. Still intense, but the possibility of large earthquakes right beneath the city in the way that Northridge was. But Northridge was really at the northern edge of the more populated area. If it had been beneath downtown, its losses would have been much greater. So as they say in real estate, location, location, location. And I remind you again, the double earthquakes that we had in the Ridgecrest situation. So very quickly, of course, this is why all of you in CERT do what you do, and why we need to get everybody else involved in taking actions on their own and in their neighborhoods. All the utilities are going to be out. The roads aren't going to be able to, people aren't able to get around the way they're used to. All the stores and banks and pharmacies and ATMs and all these are going to be closed. You're not going to be able to get information. And so this is why it's so important. We have the 7 steps to earthquake safety, full descriptions of what to do before, during, and after in English and in Spanish on our websites, earthquakecountry.org and terremotos.org. We have additional information and guidance actually in 16 languages now at earthquakecountry.org/languages, what to do to be safe, what to do how to secure your belongings, so they won't fall or fly across the room, especially your top heavy furniture, bolting it with flexible straps into the wall, not L brackets. Those have been shown to just actually break and maybe even rip your furniture, so that you can use an adhesive on the furniture. Lots of products on the market for that. Very important to secure your big TVs. These fall over with a breath the inseams are so skinny and thin, or by bumping them. So a really good idea to do that, or mount them on the wall, even best. And there's many other things you can do. Really start with moving. All of you right now, even as you're listening, can look around the room and say, is there something heavy above me that I should just move lower? Because maybe the earthquake will happen tonight and I'll be sitting here and it would hit me, or my pets, or my children, or it would break and it's something valuable. So that's a really free thing you can do. Otherwise, look around. What haven't you secured? If you are reliant on mobility device like a wheelchair, make sure that your exit is anything along your path to your exit. All those items are secured so they don't fall and block your way to get out. Of course, step 2, have your disaster plan, know how to communicate. Take CERT training and other the Ryland Ready Your LA neighborhood program and many others that, get to know your neighbors, work with them. That's how you're going to be responding. This particular shakeout scenario really was to test the overall system. We aren't going to have people being able to come in from other parts of the region to help because everyone's going to be responding. So everyone is going to be largely on their own for a while. Of course, I'm not going to get into disaster supplies, but we have a lot of information and simple ways of organizing different types of items listed on our website too. We have a checklist where you can choose what to have in different locations. We think is kind of neat. Okay, and then also before the earthquake, organize your important documents. If you can, you may want to strengthen your property. There are incentive programs to provide funding through the California Earthquake Authority, in particular, that come online at different times of the year to apply. And of course, earthquake insurance is not part of your homeowner's insurance and or your regular renter's insurance, but you can look into both of those. What to do during an earthquake. I just really want to quickly highlight the importance of not getting in doorways, not running outside. We really promote that you drop down and get low, make yourself a smallest target as you can, get under something for additional shelter. In most situations, we're fortunate, like if you look at the Northridge earthquake, there were buildings that collapsed, very few though, and very few total collapse, but tens of thousands of houses and buildings and offices that may have looked like this. So you're more likely going to be dealing with falling items that you want to avoid and not get hit by. Getting down low is really key. So you want to drop down where you are. Don't try to run some safe place in some other room. Don't run to your children. Make sure they're prepared and have practiced, or that their space is prepared so nothing will fall on them. Drop where you are. Cover your head and neck as right as you can, just in case something can come at you. This is especially important if you're in an area that you don't know if things are secured. If you can't get under something, like crawling to get underneath it, get next to a wall or something so you have less likelihood of things coming at you, and hold on if you're under something to that shelter until it stops. You want to adapt to your situation. If you can't get down and get back up again on your own, don't. You might stay seated, stay in bed. If you're in bed, turn over, cover your head with a pillow. Don't try to get out. You're going to likely be walking through broken glass. We have a lot of guidance at earthquakecountry.org/accessibility. And we have videos on our YouTube channel that similar to these, showing what to do and if there's a table nearby or not. And also if you use a cane, lock your wheels, cover and hold on. If you use a wheelchair, including a power wheelchair, and even if a walker has a lock, you can lock your wheels. Cover your head and neck as best as you can to your abilities. And so, some very key aspects, a lot more available there. Of course, you protect yourself when you feel shaking. Hopefully you all in California know about our new earthquake early warning system from the USGS in California, in the state of California, where earthquakes are detected by a network of sensors. A signal sent to the main location, like at Caltech, determines right away, an earthquake's happening, and will send us a warning to you if you're in an area it thinks it's going to have strong enough shaking that you might be concerned and want to get a warning. So you won't get a warning for every earthquake. and it'll have to be above a certain magnitude, and it'll have to be where you are a certain intensity level. You might get it in different ways. You might get a wireless emergency alert, like an Amber Alert, and that's going to have that sound, but it's only going to have text on the screen. If you download the MyShake app to your phone, and there are a couple other apps too, that are new apps that are specific for early warning, not just telling you where it was several minutes afterwards. These have audio warnings, so that MyShake will say, have a sound, and it'll say, earthquake, earthquake, drop, cover, hold on, protect yourself now. And so you won't even have to be holding your phone to know what that alert was. And some Android phones have it built in. If you have all these, you might get all of the alerts. So the key thing is it's that this may be a few seconds away. You may actually even get the alert if you're close enough to the earthquake after the shaking has already gone by. It may also be the big San Andreas earthquake far enough away that you get the alert and then you don't feel anything for a while. And then you feel a jolt and you're like, oh, that wasn't that big a deal. But that strong shaking, like I showed you, is still on its way. And so you want to really stay down for a while. Of course, you can practice during the shakeout. That happens out in October, and many of you I know participate. So just wrapping up, after an earthquake, help people as you all do, insert, prevent further injuries and damage, be ready for aftershocks. And if you're near the coastline, drop, cover, hold on right away, but then move inland, as that earthquake may have been offshore and a tsunami maybe it's on its way. In the long term, it's all about reconnecting and restoring our connections with others, our daily life, repairing our damage, rebuilding our community. And all this is on our website, again, earthquakecountry.org, and in Spanish at terremotos.org. I thank you for letting me share all this information with you. And again, thank you for all that you do. If there's time for any questions, or I'll stay on and answer them in the chat as well.
Thank you, Mark. And after our next three presenters, we'll go ahead and open it up for roundtable. So if you can hang on to the end, we do appreciate that. All right. Up next is Captain Rico Gross.
Rico, if you're talking, you're muted.
There's three Rico Grosses on here.
Patrick, do me a favor, unmute the other Rico.
Boom. You guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Outstanding. I got it.
Hold on, Captain. Your audio is really jittery. We can't hear you.
How about now? Better now?
Yes, better.
I was just saying, I got thanks for that. Is huge 50 and someone who's meal in my disaster role in our feasibility functionality.
Captain, your audio is still pretty bad. Can you maybe turn off your video?
Let's do this.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Check, check, check.
much better. We lost you. I don't know if you're still there.
I am still here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Outstanding. I think we're good to go now. Now we're cooking with gasoline. Don't cook with gasoline, by the way. So, is the audio a little bit better?
Much better.
All right, cool. I was just saying to thank you to Mr. Mark Binthian. He's a great supporter and help for LAFD and has been a good mentor in our limited conversations. But please, please, please go to that website. I have the link in the end of my slides here. And please utilize it. It's a great resource. Share it. Sign up for the alerts. Sign up for their notifications as well. And it'll provide with a wealth of information. My name is Rico Gross. I'm captain with LA City Fire. I'm the disaster preparedness officer. Myself and Captain Gates oversee the CERT program and then the larger umbrella of disaster preparedness and integration with the city partners is kind of my field of expertise. My discussion here tonight is really the functionality. What does LAFD do? You know, we hear that fire is not going to be there. There's going to be limited capacity. Let's answer some of those questions and make sure you put them in the chat. Let me know how you feel. And I really want to, on one side, let you know the reality, and on the other side, let you know the comfort and what we do provide and what we do. So let's see here. Let's see if my presentation will work for me. Outstanding. There it goes. I found this slide a while back, and I love it because I don't like absolutes. I'm a firefighter. There's not a situation you're going to put me in that I'm not going to figure out or at least attempt. If someone's life is on the line, we're going to figure it out. And I'm going to bring a lot of help with me. You can know more, win a war, than you can win an earthquake. Yeah, that might be true, but I'm going to make you prove it. A lot of the conversation we're going to have tonight is what we are as LAFD. 4 geographic bureaus, very similar to our CERT call-out team, their mirror image. That's 106 fire stations, 3,800 firefighters. Urban search and rescue. We have several USAR, or as they're called, groups within the city and task forces within the city. And those are just organized entities of urban search and rescue. Our hazmat, our helicopters, and our waterways and our boats. Each of those, yes, I'll have to admit, are vulnerable to the earthquake, but we attempt the best we can to be resilient and prepared in any disaster with one mission, one goal. Activate, survey, survey and report, triage and act. And I'll go through each of those very briefly. So typically when there is an earthquake, our response and assessment, info and sharing, stabilization and recovery, preparedness are the entities or the factors we're going to try to cover. Those are our goals during an earthquake. We're going to talk about response and assessment first. Obviously, you saw some of the early pictures of some of the devastation and the damage. The roads might be compromised. The infrastructure might be compromised. But this picture here is about what you get on an everyday incident. That's only about 10 companies in the picture. We have 106 fire stations. Most of them have 2 and 3 apparatus. And in a moment, I'll get into a discussion about our activation levels. So we're 1,200 members on duty right now. We have an additional 2,400, like myself, that are at home enjoying their evening off. Just kidding. So what happens? We have an earthquake. In LAFD, we have to feel it. Like Mr. Binthian stated, there's earthquakes going on all the time, but they're not always felt. When they are felt, our Metro Fire Communications puts us in earthquake mode. Every station, 106, go into operation. They immediately leave their quarters, they survey their districts, and they report through their chains of command. Their immediate chain of command would be what's called an area command, which is the exact same thing as those 4 geographic bureaus. That's going to be through radio, landline, direct, or our auxiliary communications. All companies respond. So think about that for a second when we state, hey, there's a small scale, medium scale, or large scale activation. just like we teach our CERT members, you want to take care of your personal safety first. We're going to do that at the fire station, but we're going to get out of the station and make sure we're able to fulfill our duties and objectives. So again, all of those companies, their role is to survey their districts, triage and assign companies for mitigation. And what is mitigation? That's effective rescue. When we are in that operational mode, depending on the complexity, the size, and the scope, we can activate our Department Operations Center. The Department Operations Center is, in essence, a backup to our Metro Fire Communications. And if you understand what backup means in the fire service, it's, well, Rico's going in that hot environment. So just in case he doesn't succeed, I'm going to follow right behind him, push him out of the way if he's too slow, and get the job done better. In essence, that's what our Department Operations Center does. I'm joking, I'm in jest, they're really a next level of command and control, but they give us the flexibility for Rico to put out the fire, in this case, assess the damage and report what I need to accomplish my job. And again, that's supported through our areas and, if need be, our zone commanders. That's a little bit technical. I'm not going to go into it too much. I know area and zone sound simple, but it actually gets really technical in our command staff and command organizational structure. Our next layer is going to be our mutual aid, LAPD, obviously going to be our partners in crime, and then our city departments. That's going to include our recreation and park. Put in the chat if you know what recreation and park does during a mass disaster like an earthquake, and you'll get the prize. Also, our Department of Transportation, Sanitation, Department of Water and Power. All of us organize, come together to mitigate the problem. So, Rico running around trying to put out the fires, assess, triage, and treat. Our DOC giving me more resources. Our area and zones, excuse me, it's actually zones than area to get technical, supporting those efforts, and then our area partners coming together to do the greatest good that we can. Treat, triage, shelter, and then our mission. Specific to the LAFD, our mission is really simple. It's only to save lives, property, foster economic growth, and protect the environment. Really simple, right? To do that in a mass emergency, I might need some help. And as you can see, we would go into what's called recall mode. Communications might be down. However, I would know right now that there was a major disaster. And when I try to call my communications or my fire station and I'm not getting a response, it's time to go to work. And that's when our 2,400 other employees that are at home like me right now, we're going to go to work. And we're going to come in and develop our strategy, tactics, teams, meow, to do our treatment, triage, shelter, and support our mission. And as I said, our mission is really simple. I will actually put it up there. Preserve life and property, promotes public safety, fosters economic growth through a commitment of prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery as an all-risk life safety responder. So the reason I put that up there, our response is a very small part of our functionality. So if we think about it, even though we're running 1,200 to 1,600 calls a day, and during an earthquake, it's a very large disaster that's going to require a lot of resources and time. Okay, it's going to take months, weeks, years to recover. And that is also part of our mission, which brings me to the next steps of my job, Captain Gates' job, and thus those of CERT, which is getting the community back on their feet, getting us in some sort of similitude of normal life. So, what are we doing at the initial shaking? Just to answer that question. Fires, collapsed structures, hazmat, traffic, medical, damage assessments, landslides, tsunamis. Those are the same things we do every day. We're going to have a few more obstacles with some broken buildings, some collapsed structures, but we're going to be resilient and provide the best we can. As I stated from the beginning, we're going to call in for some help. We're going to go to the area, the region, the state, and we're going to call in more people. We're going to call in more resources. It's going to take some time, which really, what we talked about a few minutes ago, were CERT volunteers where we really jump in and affect the plan and the mission. And that's giving us the resources we need to take care and mitigate all of the problems. So Rico's putting out the fire or pulling someone out of a building, but I need someone to go over and help their neighbor. I need someone to go over and ensure that there's water to their friends and their children. That's where our auxiliary teams come in. And in a large-scale disaster, yes, we may all get called upon to do a little bit more, a little bit longer. But as I said, we're going to find a way to get that mission done. Triage, treat, shelter per that mission. So, a couple things that we have help with. Technology. The department goes into earthquake mode. The U.S. alerting system, the USGS alerting system. Again, if it's a localized earthquake, we may not get a prompt warning. However, that allows us to at least notify our resources and get them in a position where they're safe and they can respond. And then also our LA Ready and GIS mapping system. Those are made for now with our, if there's a tsunami, the after effects of an earthquake, and our next level overall damage assessments. Again, some of these systems we may lose during the earthquake. However, we've built up resiliencies to bring those back. And there's just a picture of our systems there. And then I did put on the Alert California cameras, because we'll be utilizing those to see what system-wide damages we have. Again, if they're up and functioning. So, activation. Citywide department response. We call it a windshield survey, that leaving the station, driving the districts, assessing the damage or triaging. Report that damage, and in that triage, protect life and property based upon the severity. So if it's a lower risk, someone that's not critically injured, would we triage and take care of that person first? Absolutely. But you would do the same if it was your family or someone else. And that's why, again, we need those additional layers. Preparation. Like I said, the very next phase and more of the ongoing phase in my particular job is building and fire code changes. There's been a vast amount of changes and kind of revolutionary. We'll see how they work on the next big one. But hopefully there's some provisions out there and much smarter people than I that are engineers that have developed some structures to be structurally sound. One of them's in the background there. That's our Fire Station 4, the Emergency Operations Center, the Department Operations Center, and LAPD. If you ever want to come by and visit, let me know. So, resources. You are the resources. Beyond LAFD, beyond the fire department, beyond the police department, our other critical assets, even Red Cross, even CERT. If you're watching this video and you want to discover some tools, please join the community. Go on the resources that we're going to show you here in a moment and that Mr. Benthian showed, and be part of the plan. The plan are operating guidelines. We've updated those to earthquakes to keep ourselves safer and to give us better strategy, tactics, and techniques. And then our technological advances. So that's what it may look like, right? Those are two very drastic and really life-changing pictures. I'm sure those of us on this call remember them. To better ourselves, we do constant drilling and preparation. We try to prepare our CERT team members, our auxiliary communications at ACS the best we can, because they're our next line of support. and we make partnerships with the U.S. Geological, Earthquake, that's supposed to say country, and California Shakeout. So what else can you do to prepare? Download the guide made by my predecessor. There's the link. I'll put it in the chat in a moment. It is not as inclusive as the Mr. Benthian's, but it will give you some very good ideas and tasks that you can do to keep yourself safe. There's the other link for Earthquake Country Alliance. Please sign up for their alerts. And one other plug I will really have to give, sign up for Notify LA and PulsePoint. Download it on your phone. The fire department has the ability to put out notifications through your mobile devices if you've signed up for one of those benchmarks. Please sign up for them. And if you want to go big, sign up for CERT LA. And that's what it looks like. That is the LAFD's response in a nutshell and preparation. I am Captain Rico Gross. I will be standing by for any questions at the end. Otherwise, I thank you for your time. Very much appreciated. Hopefully that gives you a little snapshot into what our immediate actions are. And like Mr. Benthian said, yes, it can happen here. What I want you to concentrate on is, what are you doing before? What are you doing after? Prepare yourself for during, but come and join me to get ready for before and after. Thank you very much, Patrick. I give it back to you.
Thank you, Captain Gross. And next up, we have Crisanta Gonzalez from Los Angeles City Emergency Management Department. Let's try that again.
That's great. Hi, good evening, everybody, and thank you for having me. And I always I should remember to put in the request to not go after Captain Gross because he steals my thunder. So darn it. Thank you, Captain Gross, and thank you, Mark Benthian, for presenting such great information. I feel like I have nothing else to present, but I'm going to go ahead and do my best. So my name is Crisanta Gonzalez. I am an emergency manager for the City of Los Angeles Emergency Management Department, and it is my great honor to be the division chief over the Community Preparedness and Engagement Division. And I'll talk a little bit about the different divisions in our department. So by a show of hands, how many of you have heard of my department? If you can use your little hand icon and raise your hands. 7, 8, 9. Okay, quite a few. Okay, great. A lot of you. Got a couple of applause. Thank you very much. So quite a few, 13. Great. So we're going to talk a little bit about my department and kind of what we do and what we would do in the event of a large scale earthquake, as we saw, unfortunately, in this part of the world. Let me share my screen real quick. All right, can you all see?
We can see it.
Great. All right, so City of Los Angeles Emergency Management Department. What do we do and how to prepare for a disaster? So what we do is we plan and prepare all the departments and the residents and the businesses for emergencies and disasters. And how do we do that? We try and lead citywide efforts and emergencies, both in mitigation and readiness and response and in recovery. So Mark and Rico talked a lot about what that looks like and what that means. So we do many things with our 4 departments. We have divisions. We have the Community Preparedness and Engagement Division, which is my division. So my division goes out into the community, whether it's speaking to organizations such as CERT, homeowners associations, houses of faith, running our task force. We have a monthly task force for city entities and also for neighborhood councils. We have multiple organizations that we go out and present to. We do community presentations for businesses. We create programs for the housing developments in our communities. We create programs and present at various institutions who ask us to come to them, banks, apartment buildings, and we bring preparedness tools so that people can feel a little bit more prepared. We created a tool called Ready Your LA Neighborhood, which I'm going to talk about later on at the end of the slideshow. And what that does is it's kind of a smaller version of CERT. It identifies community leaders and it asks for those community leaders to bring their neighbors, just the neighbors that you can check on in the first golden hour. So as you all know, because you're all CERT enthusiasts or CERT trained, the golden hour is the first hour after an incident or an event where you check on those within your line of sight when you walk out your front door, and you can go check on every door to make sure that everybody's okay. So the Ready Your LA Neighborhood program is designed for neighbors to go out and break up into teams and check on each other in that first hour and break up into these teams. So we have a great program, a great what we call shingle, so that all the neighbors can get together ahead of time, identify what tools, what resources, what skills everybody has, so that in the event of a pandemic or a long power outage or an earthquake or an evacuation notice, you already have your plan ahead of time. So those are some of the things that my division does. Innovation and development, they are responsible for our grant projects, our disabilities and functional needs, to make sure we're inclusive of all Angelenos. They're responsible for making sure that our notification system, Notify LA, that Rico mentioned, is sent out and spread out to all Angelenos. So if you haven't already signed up for Notify LA, and can I, by a show of hands here, can you raise your hand icon if you have already signed up for Notify LA? Great, I see a lot of you. If you haven't, I would encourage you to go to our website and fill out your profile, because we do use a geofence. So in order for you to get your notifications for your specific area, it's important that you complete your entire profile. That way, if we're sending a tsunami warning to San Pedro, but you live in the valley, if you haven't completed your entire profile, we don't want you to get cross-mixed because you don't have your zip code in there. So please consider that if you haven't already. So the innovation and development, they're the ones that help draft those notifications and those messages. Operations and training. They make sure that the Emergency Operations Center, in which I work at, my group works at, has the latest technology, that our main coordination room is ready for when the other departments show up, so that we can manage a disaster and manage an event. They provide training. We have a really cool training every year where we work with the military. It's called the Defense Support to Civil Authorities, or DISCA, and we practice the military every year on how cities work with militaries and what the language speak. So that's a really cool thing we do. They also work with the Planning and Resilience Division. So as the Planning Division, the City of Los Angeles has an emergency operation plan, and beneath that plan, we have 42 annexes. So whether it's an earthquake annex or a extreme heat annex or a tsunami annex or an adverse weather annex, or it could be a myriad of what we think might go wrong. We have those annexes. And so we go through and we check them in a 2-year cycle, and we bring all the departments together. And so that division checks it line by line and makes sure that it's up to date and adequate. And they work with the training division to create workshops, to create trainings, to create tabletop exercises, to create full-scale exercises on an annual year, where they invite the fire department, the police department, all the city agencies. We get together and we go to the EOC and we practice to these plans, and we test them, and we try and test them so that they'll fail. Because we don't want the plan to succeed when we test it. We want to find the failures in it. So operations and training and planning work together to make sure that we're prepared as a city to respond in support of our residents when something goes wrong on a gray sky day. Of course, somebody's got to pay the bills and finance everything. So our administrative and finance division does that for us. So that's a little bit about the divisions within our department. Talk a little bit about the Emergency Operations Center. How many of you understand what an emergency operations? How many of you have watched the movie Volcano, by show of hands? with Tommy Lee Jones. So that was actually filmed at the county EOC, not the city EOC, but the LA County EOC. So that was filmed. So when you see that EOC, or when you see a lot of the movies that have like NASA, so our Emergency Operations Center is a little bit more modern now. So of course, Volcano was filmed quite a few years ago, but back then that was the top of the line. So if you ever have an opportunity, please reach out to Patrick. If you can get a group together, we'd love to give you a tour of our EOC. It's a nice building. We're very proud of it. It's 84,000 square feet, 2-story, seismically based isolated facility. So what that means is at the bottom, if you go into our basement, the building stands on some pillars, and so some of the pillars have almost like a hydraulic base, and then the other ones have a rocker arm, so that it absorbs an earthquake. So when we have an earthquake, we ask those that are in the building to drop cover and hold. We don't ask them to evacuate because it's safer to be in our building than to evacuate from the building. So it's a pretty cool base isolation system. It was designed by one of the top companies in the world that builds these base isolation systems for bridges that sit on top of bodies of water. So it's pretty cool. So if you ever get a chance and Patrick wants to pull together a field trip, feel free to get some people together and reach out to me. We're co-located with Fire Station 4 and also with the Fire Dispatch Center upstairs. So we have the Police 911 Center is in the Valley, San Fernando Valley, but the Fire 911 Center is upstairs for us, which dispatches the ambulances. We also have the LA Police Department and then the LA Fire Departmental Operations Center that Rico spoke a little about, the DOC, is also upstairs in our building. So we're all co-located in one building so that we can talk to each other, walk across the hall. Whenever there's an event or an incident, we're all there and we all know each other. We see each other every day. So the communication flow is open and we don't have any silos. So that's always great for partnership building. And whenever there's an event, we all know each other. We can go ask each other anything. So that's very helpful, because sometimes that can happen in businesses and in government. Sometimes the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, but we're very fortunate in Los Angeles that we work very well together. So the EOC features that main coordination room that I was talking about, where you saw it on Volcano, right? Where you have the computers and the desks. And we have a media center. So we have a jumbo screen that we just got right in time for Super Bowl, but unfortunately we were not able to play the game on it. But we also have a training room, a management room where the directors, the EOC directors sit. That's usually a deputy chief of police, a deputy fire chief, a deputy emergency operations person. We usually have a public information officer in there. And then if there's some policy change that needs to be made, we have a room off to the side for an executive conference room in case the deputy mayor needs to come in and make an executive decision on policy for the city. We have breakout rooms. And then one unique thing that we've tried to implement and we're trying to build out, it's called a business operations center. So something that's kind of unique in emergency management that we think is important is we're trying to include the private sector. We think that it's very important to hear the voices of not only Angelenos, but the voices of our private sector. So where we have an event like the 2017 fires, Uber and Lyft worked with us to get a code for those that were displaced, and were able to use this code to go from the shelter to the local assistance center that we set up to come replace their driver's license, to come get assistance for new glasses, to get food vouchers. So they were able to Uber back and forth with this code. So we're able to coordinate these things with private businesses and work with them. And also VOADs are volunteer organizations. So we have a great volunteer organization called ENLA, the Emergency Network of Los Angeles, that helped us as well. So they bring in people like Wounded Warrior Projects or those kinds of organizations who volunteer their time to help those who have been affected by disasters. So we're always working to build these relationships and prepare for the inevitable, right? Because we're all waiting, as Mark, scientifically, we're all waiting for this earthquake to hit Los Angeles. So we as a city and city agencies, we're doing everything we can to get ready. My division is trying to send out these, Ready Early Neighborhood and trying to support the CERT program and saying, hey, there's these tools because as Rico mentioned, We don't have enough responders. So we're doing everything we can to train for it, to be ready for it, to make sure that we have everything in place for it, including working with the residents and working with the businesses. We're also really excited to work with the amateur radio. We have an amateur radio room in our emergency operations center. We just practiced with it this, we're going to be practicing with it this weekend for the LA Marathon on Sunday the 19th. We have the amateur radios positioned along the route, and they're going to be radioing in information through the LA Fire. They work under the LA Fire Department umbrella. So we're practicing that. So in case the communications goes down, we're going to go back to basics and use amateur radio. So we're making sure that our skill set is top notch at every level, whether it's back to basics, pen and paper, all the way up to technology. At the top of the technology, how can we use social media? How can we track what you guys are posting on Facebook, Instagram, the information, the pictures you guys are posting? How can we use that? So we're using everything. We're trying to make sure that we're connected to everything so we can really be prepared and know what the common operating picture is. So it's a little bit about what we're how our emergency operations center is set up. The main coordination room I was talking about is 7,500 square feet. We have 29-foot ceilings. We have what were called work pods. So imagine when you come to your CERT, you report to CERT, right? All of you guys come and you report to CERT, and imagine that there was tables set up, and each table had a responsibility. So one table had a responsibility to create a map, and another table had a responsibility to identify the hospitals, and another table had a responsibility to identify the fire stations, and another table had a responsibility to identify the schools, and another table had a responsibility to identify all the bridges, and another table had a responsibility to locate all the traffic lights that were not working. So it's the same process. Every table has a function. So in our world, we assign a function to each of these work pods. So it's a damage assessment pod, or a traffic pod, or a building pod, or a utilities pod, or a law enforcement pod, or a fire pod, or a shelter and welfare pod, and those, or a logistics pod, or a finance and admin pod. So everybody has a function. Within those functions, we have seats for departments to sit in there. So for example, if it's a damage assessment pod, then we have Bureau of Engineering who may sit there, building and safety may sit there, traffic officers, so DOT may sit there. So we have seats assigned with vests specifically at those pods. So when you come to the EOC, it may not be me, it may be an engineer who comes, and he or she is assigned to that seat. And we're grateful that each department sends these subject matter experts and trains them with us. They send them to the trainings, they send them to the functional exercise, they send them to the tabletop exercise. So all these workshops we do throughout the year, these individuals come and they train with us. So they understand that when they come to sit at this seat, they understand their role. They understand how to use our computer systems. They understand what their role is. They understand what our battle rhythm is. They understand how our paperwork flows. They understand their role in the little wheels and the cogs. So that's how our pod system works. It's based off the incident command system. How many of you here by show of hands know what the incident command system is? Okay. How many of you by show of applause knows that every great thing from the incident command system and state emergency management system and national incident management system came from California? By show of applause. Because California is great. Yes. So everything started in California. ICS started in Southern California. SEMS pushed up through all of California. 9/11, president said, where can we get the best system? They said, California. So California rocks. A round of applause for California, because we created the best management system. So every EOC that wants to get funded by FEMA has to set up their tables, their pods in this ICS SIMS NIM system. And that's how ours is set up. And if you want to see kind of what that looks like, it looks like this. So this is our jumbo screen. These are our pods. So you can see kind of a couple of different angles. As I mentioned before, Patrick wants to get a little field trip together. It's kind of hard if you're in Turkey, but we can throw you on a Zoom camera and you can video walk through it. More than welcome, you know, we can definitely throw something together for you. But we're very proud of our building. We're very proud of you know, the people that come to work here. You can see that each chair has a different color vest. If you sit at a chair that has a red vest, those are the boots on the ground that I was talking about. Those are the operations section. So that's your law enforcement, your fire, your building and safety, your engineers, your shelters, anybody who's doing something out in the field is wearing a red vest. If you're wearing a yellow vest, those are your logistical people. Those are the ones that are getting the contracts together, that are identifying, you know, the porta potties, the tents, the tables, the heaters, all of that stuff. If you're wearing a green vest, then you are doing your finance and admin. You're doing the contracts. You're doing the emergency proclamations. You're doing all the legal work. If you're wearing a blue vest, up at the front by the screens, you're putting together the battle rhythm. You're putting together the emergency action plan. You're putting together the situational report. You're putting together all the maps. You're plotting everything. You're putting together, you're controlling the screens at the front of the room. Those are the planning and intelligence section. So everybody has a role. And if you're in this little room over here to the right, that's the management section. You're looking down onto the floor, and those are the leadership. Those are the ones that are at the high level, 30,000 views, to decide what is the next step for the city. How do we get the city going back on its feet? What do we need to do? Let's look at all the data that these other chairs, these other people that are working, let's look at the data they've collected and what is the decision to help get the city back on its feet. So that's our main coordination room here. This is a little bit about the survivability. If you ever pull up by our building, you'll see that we have some white poles that surround our building. That is actually created. It's a perimeter fencing, and it's so that we, if there's a car bomb, if there's ever a car bomb, it's so that we can withstand a car bomb. We have video surveillance. We have 24-hour guards. We have emergency backup generators. We have a reserve water storage tanks, redundant heating, ventilators, we have air conditioning systems, reserve water sewage. We have cots, rooms with cots. We have a gym. We have showers. We have a locker room. We have meals ready to eat behind the giant jumbo screen. We can actually sustain ourselves and stay there for a couple of weeks. So if we have to live there, we can. Here's how we activate. So today, my staff and I, some of them are on the call today. We're actually at the EOC working today, and my fellow division chief, Jennifer, was yesterday working at the EOC. We've been activated at a level 2 due to the weather here. So you can see here, we were activated level 2 due to the rainstorm. So we worked from 8 o'clock today till 4:30 today at a level 2. Level 3 is our lowest possible level. And that's usually just the duty officer, myself, and my duty team staff. Sometimes we may not even go into the EOC. We will be activated at a level 3 with myself and my duty team at the EOC for the marathon. As I mentioned today, we were at a level 2, which means we brought in other sections. So we activated the traffic pod, we activated the law enforcement pod, we activated the fire pod, we activated the public works pod, we activated the utilities pod, we activated the finance and admin pod. So we activated about 8 pods altogether today. Many of the technical specialists were activated due to the eroding dirt and some of the houses that were sliding off the hillside, and some of the geological and engineering things that needed to be taken care of today. So that's just an example. Level 1 is a bad day. Level 1, if we're activated at level 1, that's a bad day in Los Angeles. Everybody, all hands are on deck, all pods are activated if it's a level 1. So if the earthquake that we're talking about, we would be activated at a level 1. And it would be all hands on deck, upstairs, downstairs, all across the city, and the EOC would have everybody in. And it would be operated at a 12-hour shift, A watch and B watch, 7 days a week. We did that for the pandemic. We were not off, 7 days a week, 12 hours on. So you either worked A watch or you worked B watch. There were some of us who didn't get a day off for months. So the next, here's some of the activations. For COVID-19, we did over 1,000 days of EOC activation. We also were activated for monkeypox, Summit of the Americas, extreme heat, the 27th Street incident, 2020 protests for racial justice, Super Bowl, LA Marathon last year, and upcoming the LA Marathon this Sunday. Some of the top wildfires, mayoral inauguration, January, February, and now March rainstorms we've been activated. And now we have recently, with the election of Mayor Karen Bass, we've now activated now for homelessness. Let's talk a little bit about, that's a little bit about how we will respond in an earthquake. Now I want to talk about Ready Your LA Neighborhood. Sorry. Let's talk about Ready Your LA Neighborhood and what that means. So what that means is, let me talk numbers for you. There's less than 10,000 police officers and less than 3,500 firefighters for a city of 4 million people. Let me say that again. There's less than 10,000 police officers and less than 3,500 firefighters for 4 million people. Sometimes our city has up to 6 million people when people are coming in to study, because not everybody lives in the city. Some people live outside the city and they come into work or they come into to study. Keep in mind that those 9,888 police officers and those 3,246 firefighters, that's everybody. That's all 3 shifts. That's sometimes, that's not one shift. That's not who's working right now. That's all the shifts. That's sometimes they're sick, sometimes they're on vacation. So when this earthquake hits, you divide that number and subtract whoever's sick, whoever's on vacation, whoever's not on shift, and whoever can't make it here when they're off shift. And that number that's left has to respond to a level 1 disaster that's affecting 4+ million people. So are they going to be able to get to you in your neighborhood? Chances are they want to. I know they want to. I want to get to you in your neighborhood. I know every law enforcement person I know wants to get to you in your neighborhood. Every firefighter I know wants to get to you in your neighborhood. Every person I know who's a civil servant who I work with wants to get to you in your neighborhood. That's what they do. They run towards the fires, right? They run towards the bullets, right? They run towards the disasters. They run towards people. That's what rec and parks people do. That's what civil servants do. That's what you all do who are on this call. You take CERT because you want to be part of the solution. You run towards the disaster rubble. You volunteer to go help. You're running towards a disaster to help find a solution. That is your calling. That's what calls you. You're called to be part of the solution. Unfortunately, there's not enough of us. So what do? We help spread the word. We have people like yourselves, like Patrick, who help spread the word about CERT. And then we help spread the word about Ready Your LA Neighborhood, because we have to be there for our neighbors. We have to be there for our neighbors. And that's a tough sell in the city of Los Angeles. The city of Los Angeles is not known for its neighborly hospitality. So, talked about this a little bit. Realistically, when an earthquake like the kind we're talking about happens, this slide says it could be several days before help arrives. We're being hopeful, saying several days. The news from this earthquake that we're specifically talking about right now, we saw people that were buried in the rubble for several days and still were found alive. Are we better prepared for it? I hope so. We've California and Los Angeles in itself has taken a great pride in fixing our buildings and our roadways and our bridges. So will we come out a little bit better? I believe so. I strongly believe so. But I still think we need to really get to know our neighbors. And we need to protect ourselves. We need to understand who our vulnerable populations are. We need to put down our ideas of what we think about each other and put those aside and take care of each other. How do we do that? We join CERT. We learn about CERT. We learn about triaging, and we learn about what that takes in a regional stance. And then we learn about, before you go to your certain region to meet up with CERTs, first stabilize your neighborhood with Ryland. Right? So let's learn a little bit about Ryland. Maybe this might not work. So the video didn't work, but what I'd like you to do is I would like you to go to YouTube when you get a moment and go to Ready Your LA Neighborhood and just search that. And it's 6 minutes, 6-minute video. And it talks about this program that we've created and that we're still working on, and that we're hoping to put it into an app, and we've just created it into a one for business. So it brings together your neighbors. So you get to sit around and eat crackers and cheese and create a plan. And then at the end of your meeting, you all go home and you have this plan in a bag along with some sturdy shoes, a bicycle helmet or a hard hat, a vest, a flashlight, extra pair of glasses, and your Ready Your LA Neighborhood plan in your backpack that you tie at the foot of the bed. So when this earthquake hits, that bag is still tied to the foot of the bed. Even if your bed shakes, right? That bag is still there. So as soon as you get out of bed or wherever you're at, if you are in bed, you put on your shoes, because the number one injury after an earthquake is cut feet. You check on yourselves. Oh, thank you, Brenda, for putting that. One of my staff put the link to the video in there. And, and then you check on your family, and then you run through the Ryland steps in your home, and then you go out and you put either an okay or a help sign outside your door that comes with the kit, with your Ready Your LA Neighborhood kit, and you put your fire extinguisher outside, and that's all part of this meeting that you have with your neighbors. And then you get together and you form teams, you stabilize your neighborhood, you come back and analyze what's good and what's not good. And then after that, your neighborhood is stabilized, then you go to your CERT and you do it all over again and you report to your CERT commander. Hey, my street is good, we're Ryland ready. So you can highlight that one's good. So I would greatly appreciate it if you check that video out and go to our website. Brenda, if you could put the readyla.org link in here as well, that would be great. If you check our website, readyla.org, we'll be more than happy to help you walk through this Ready Your LA Neighborhood with your neighbors. We're here to support you. I hope that you've enjoyed my presentation. I hope that it was beneficial. I will be here for questions. And if I can be of any service, Patrick has so thank you again. I will turn it back over to Patrick.
Thank you, Crisanta. Before I get started, let's get a number. If you are CERT trained, go ahead and give a thumbs up. Let's get a poll here. All right, looks like about 68 people. That's awesome. All right. So for those of you who are not CERT trained people, thank you for coming. Thank you for attending. I hope that you have learned a lot. This is where I tell you what you can do to get trained, where you can get prepared, organized, get ready for whatever. We talk about earthquakes because earthquakes are all hazard. Pretty much if you're prepared for an earthquake, you can really be prepared for anything. A blizzard, snowstorm, a pandemic, flooding, any kind of disaster, an earthquake's going to cover it. So this is why we talk about earthquakes, because we expect that the big one is going to happen sometime within our lifetimes here in Los Angeles, and getting prepared for that. But for those of us who were CERT trained when the pandemic happened and people were standing in line to get bottled water, get toilet paper, get canned food, the rest of us were sitting at home with our supplies and not having to worry about it. Well, at least for the first few weeks. None of us expected how long that would actually go for. But that's the essence about being prepared, is we don't know what can happen. And so by being prepared, we're not in that initial crush and panic, everyone who's trying to figure it out at the point of the disaster. What is the Community Emergency Response Team? Training. And I emphasize the training portion of it because while we talk about CERT as a team, it really is, in essence, free training taught by the fire department. And the program was created here. It was created in Los Angeles in 1986 and then taken by FEMA and made not only a nationwide system, but we have CERT taught in other countries now. And some of the visitors on this presentation are from CERT teams from Brazil, from other countries as well. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to try and keep this short just because everyone's gone over time. So I will try and rush through this so that we can get to the question and answer portion of it. As I mentioned, it is free in the city of Los Angeles. It is taught by the fire department. The fire department has a CERT unit, and full-time firefighters actually teach the classes. They teach you to be prepared so that you can take care of yourself and your family, and during a disaster or immediately after a disaster, you can safely help your neighbors out without becoming a victim. We want you to be able to know what to do and have the proper supplies. And even if you don't want to help your neighbors out, if you can take care of yourself and your family, then the fire department doesn't have to worry about you. And they can move on to the people who are not as prepared as you and the people who are in desperate life, in need of life saving. And the reality is, for those of us who are trained, we will be the volunteer first responders in our own neighborhoods until the professionals can arrive. We talk about CERT responders and we talk about the CERT trained public. If you take the training in Los Angeles City, you are under no obligation to do anything with that training whatsoever. We hope you do. We ask you to. But if you say, I'm just going to take this for myself, I'm going to be selfish about it, cool. We're good with that. What that means is that we hope that means you're going to have up to 2 weeks, maybe more, of supplies, bottled water, shelf-stable or canned food. Canned food does not have to be heated. It is already cooked and it is safe to eat and will last years if it's kept in a climate-controlled environment. If you stick it in your car and it gets to be 120 degrees in your car, the life expectancy of that canned food is going to degrade significantly. We expect that you know how to shut off your utilities, gas, water, power, and that will prevent or at least mitigate possible disasters inside the home. We hope the training teaches you basic first aid so you can care for your family members, care for yourself, and possibly even care for your neighbors if you want to. And then know when you need to get help. If we can take care of ourselves, then we don't hopefully need help. But the reality is there will be some injuries, there will be some damage, and a lot of people will need help. And there will be nothing that can be done to mitigate that simply because we don't know how bad it's going to be, and it's going to be bad, it's going to be worse, and it's going to be extremely bad for some people. But if we can turn a minor emergency and prevent that from becoming a major emergency, we can mitigate that, then we'll be all that much better off. And most importantly, we know not to bring a victim to an incident. The basic training class, again, taught by the fire department, teaches you, it's broken up into 7 classes, 1 night a week for 2.5 hours. And it's going to teach you basic disaster preparedness, incident command that was talked about earlier, disaster psychology, disaster medical operations, how to triage a mass casualty or mass victim incident, how to do basic injury treatment, how to do fire suppression and how to treat hazardous materials or mitigate hazardous materials, how to do light search and rescue, and then finally talking about the reality of terrorism and man-made disasters and what, as a CERT responder or CERT trained public member, you can do about that, and how to avoid becoming a victim of that. Question is, what will CERT responders do after a disaster? And these are people who want to help the community. So first and foremost, everyone take care of yourself and your family. If someone in your family is injured or you're injured, you're not going to be able to help anyone else. Take care of your family first. Let others help others if you cannot. If you can, you're going to assess your home and do a size up of your immediate neighbors and find out how bad this really was. If there's no damage, no injuries, it wasn't that bad. If your house is partially collapsed or there's injuries inside the home, it's a lot worse than you wanted it to be when you woke up that morning. Monitor your two-way radio. Turn that on. If you have a family radio service radio, have a neighborhood channel with your neighbors, turn on your radio, check in, see how bad it is out there. Find out if everyone's reporting injuries and damage, then you know it's really bad. If no one's reporting injuries or damage, everyone's fine, not a big deal. Move on, get back to normal. And if you hear that everyone has injuries and damage, or there's a lot of it out there, now you know that your neighborhood disaster response team is going to have to organize and deploy into your own neighborhood until the fire professionals can arrive. And to do that, you're going to go to your closest neighborhood staging area. Again, only if you and your loved ones are safe and you're able to deploy and feel like you're up to it physically as well as mentally. CERT responders are going to meet and organize the neighborhood staging area. We'll deploy out into your neighborhoods using two-way radios to communicate. You're going to deploy out damage assessment teams, find out how bad it is, very similar to what the fire department does. Do a windshield assessment, do a damage assessment of your area, and report back to the staging area how bad it is. Then you're going to organize incident response teams that will go out and actually treat the injuries, treat the damage, do what you can to mitigate any emergencies to prevent them from getting worse, and see if you can get the people who need urgent care to the hospital or to wherever you can get that emergency assistance. You're going to communicate upwards. So you want to communicate to the fire department. Remember, we expect that cell phones will immediately be overwhelmed. 911 is going to ring busy or be in a callback mode. It's going to be very difficult to get to the 911 system with the amount of damage we expect to have during an earthquake. Now, hopefully, those systems will be operational, but we have to plan and anticipate that they will not. There's a lot of redundancies in place, but the reality is if you train worst case scenario, then hopefully it won't be the worst case scenario when you actually experience it. Let the fire department know how bad it is and where you need their help. And this is an absolute, do not put yourself in danger or risk yourself by doing something that you're not trained for or not equipped to handle. You don't want to bring a victim to an incident. As a CERT responder, you're going to be able to lead non-CERT trained or convergent volunteers and other neighborhood team volunteers, people you might have trained with, but they haven't taken the CERT training. You have been trained to do things safely and keep your team safe. So that's your primary goal, is to make sure that everybody makes it home safely. We wear green vests and helmets and green bags, and that is supposed to be a symbol to the community that help is there. They might see the fire department drive by, a fire engine drive by, and literally pass a burning building. And that's part of that windshield assessment. And that's going to freak a lot of people out. Or if they try and wave a fire engine down to get help and they keep driving, tell them we'll try and come back later, that's going to freak a lot of people out. So seeing the green vests, helmets, and backpacks will tell the community that there are first responders here to help. Even though we're not the professionals, we've been trained and we're going to do what we can to help you out. Unfortunately, most people don't know what CERT is, so we have to do some PR campaigns and really get people to understand what that green vest and helmet is, and then get people into training. We're also going to set up public gathering areas or identify public gathering areas and family reunification areas, and then be able to provide regular updates and relay information from the staging area and to the staging area at these public gathering areas. And in the end, really, we're going to try and mitigate those small emergencies before they become large emergencies. So what we need from you, we need you to get trained if you're not, but we also need you to, if you're interested, obviously you're here for a reason, but we need community leaders. We need people to step up and say, I'm interested in becoming part of the solution. And the way we're working with our coordinators right now is to really say, don't turn people away and say, take the CERT training first. Get people in and work with them, have them join our drills, have our join our trainings, and then hopefully they'll take the training when they can. But even if someone wants to be a community leader, you don't need to be CERT trained. We want you to eventually take the training, but really we need the team leaders. You heard the numbers, 4 million people in the city of Los Angeles, less than 3,500 firefighters. We've trained a lot of CERT trained people here, but we don't know where they are. We have maybe a few hundred come to the refresher every year, each of the refreshers. Those numbers don't work. In terms of coordinators, there's less than 40 of us. And so we really need the team leaders to step up and say, hey, I want to help my community. I want to be a team leader. And what we'll do is we'll build the team around you. We'll use you as our point of contact. We'll talk to you and you talk to your neighbors. And then we're going to stand beside you and help you be a better leader and help you build a team that can be self-sufficient and be able to respond without being told what to do. And we need you to help find CERT training class areas, venues that can host them. We need you to identify the possible staging areas, public gathering areas. I don't live in, I live, where I live. I don't live in other parts of the city, so it's impossible for me to know these things, but you live there. So we're going to leverage you and your knowledge of your community to really help build a good plan and then help set up community trainings and drills. To that end, what we've done is we've created the neighborhood team program. This was created by LAFD CERT coordinators to answer the question, what's next? You take the CERT training, what's next? And that's what the neighborhood team program is all about. We've created resources and tools for you so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And unfortunately, we see that all the time. There's not really good resources out there for a lot of different problems and challenges that we have. So we're working on building those tools and resources for you. We've created step-by-step guides to setting up neighborhood disaster response teams, how to set up a staging area, how to deploy damage assessment and incident response teams. We've really boiled this down, templated it so that it's easy for you to follow. These are 4-page documents at the most, so that you can follow it, and it's designed to be accessible to everybody. You don't have to be CERT trained to understand how to do this. All you need to do is follow the directions, and we constantly update these. As we drill, we find something didn't work, we modify the documentation so that we mitigate that issue and it works better the next time. Another guide on how to talk on two-way radio. We're doing monthly pop-up drills, not one in March. There's just way too much going on in March, but we're trying to do these monthly throughout the city. We just did one last month in February in coastal San Pedro. We're planning one in April up in Studio City. And these drills are single skill focused. We focus on one thing and get that done right. And as you go to the next drill, you're not doing 50 different things, you're doing one thing, and repeat that over and over again so you get the experience and training. And finally, as I mentioned, the standardized templates. These are citywide. So if you train in the Valley, you train in coastal San Pedro, you train in Northeast LA, it's all the same basic step-by-step guides, same template. They're customized to your local area, but it's the same thing that you're seeing across the city. If you're interested in finding more about this, go to join.ntp-la.org and sign up for our newsletter, and we'll tell you about all the trainings we're putting on every month. And for more information, the CERT website, cert-la.com, there's a wealth of information up there. Please go check that out. Look at our class schedule. The class schedule is accessible from there, but if you want to go just to the class schedule, cert-la.com/Eventbrite. This is free training taught by the fire department. Actual firefighters come out and teach you to be prepared. And this is the same website right now, but we're developing a team organization system that you're able to opt in at, and it'll be at certvolunteer.org. That'll also take you to the NTP sign up page. And this video is being live streamed on YouTube right now. If you search for LAFD CERT in YouTube, it's going to take you to our LAFD CERT coordinators page. You can see all the presentations and videos we've done over the past couple of years. And finally, if you need to reach us, there are 4 bureau coordinators on right now. Myself for Central Bureau, Chin from South Bureau, Christy from the Valley, and Carl from West Bureau. And you can reach us at LAFDcert at mycertteam, that's 2 T's.com. LAFDcert at mycertteam.com, and that'll reach all 4 bureau coordinators. If you have any questions or interested in becoming a team leader, reach out to us. If you're interested in hosting a CERT class, reach out to us. If you have any questions, you have a question about a question, reach out to us. All right, we have 7 minutes left for the round table. Okay. Let me unshare. We just threw a lot of information at you, and I'm very thankful for the people who stayed on. At our height, we had 290 people on between Zoom and YouTube. So if you have any questions, I'll try and also capture any questions from the YouTube feed. But if you have any questions, go ahead and raise your hand and ask away, and we'll call on you. And I'll try and read through the chat as well. And I'll stay late. I don't know about the rest of our panel, but I'll stay late to ask any additional questions, answer any additional questions. Cert trainings that don't occur on Saturday. We do offer drills on Sundays as well. We try and mix it up. It's about venue availability as well. So sometimes we can only get a venue on a Saturday, but we try and do Sunday venues as well. Mark, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Santa, is she still there?
Yes.
I am here, yes.
I'm just curious.
Yes.
You're probably at home now. If an earthquake were to occur now, how long would it take you to get to the center by walking?
Walking?
Yeah. We'll assume that there's going to be no way for you to drive. Maybe you have a bicycle.
I do have a bicycle.
Okay.
I walking, it would take me approximately 4 hours to get there.
Oh my
By
God.
bicycle, it would take me 2 hours to get there. But I'm hoping they'll come get me in a helicopter.
Okay. Good answer.
Yeah, I should be on a list where maybe I'll get picked up on a helicopter.
Thank you.
That's kind of cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I could get bumped. I'm not way up on that list, but I am on that list somewhere towards the bottom. Mark, thank you for asking.
Sally, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Yes, a great presentation by all. Really, thank you, Christina, too. In the EOC, you mentioned FEMA. Do they actually set up the shelters? I mean, have the programs and everything to set up shelters for the people that need it?
So in the city, the Department of Recreation and Parks sets up our shelters. So the FEMA, so how it works in disasters is the city takes care of its own until we run out of resources. And then we ask the county to help us, the county emergency management. And then when they run out of resources, they ask the state emergency management. And then when they run out of resources, then we go to FEMA and the president declares a declaration. So first, the shelters we use are the rec and parks shelters. We try and not use schools so we don't interrupt the schools. So we first use the Department of Recreation and Parks lets us use they're already trained, they're ADA compliant, they already have a contract with American Red Cross who comes in and does wraparound services. So we utilize them for emergency shelters.
And also large animals as well. Is that set up?
Yeah, so large animals, we have a couple different locations. So we have Pierce College works with the Department of Recreation and Parks for large animal sheltering. And I can't think of the other one off the top of my head, but Pierce College is the most common one.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Sally. Daryl, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
And this is Chin over here. How you doing, Patrick?
Good.
All right, we have a question, and just so you know, we're here at the community shul in Pico Robertson, and we do have a question from Ben over here. So let me ask.
Come on over, Ben. Come on
Come on
over here
over,
closer
Ben.
to the camera.
Ask your question.
Hey, Patrick. So I actually have two questions. The first one I put in the chat. I don't know if you saw it, but how would major aftershocks, like we saw at the 6 point and then another 7, affect responsiveness and supplies? For example, when looking back at the volcano eruption in New Zealand a few years ago, agencies and organizations were hesitant to land on the island due to secondary eruptions and hazards. Can we see a similar kind of hesitation during a major earthquake? And the second one is the LA Basin has a lot of oil wells and other hazards near high-risk locations like hospitals, for example, Cedars-Sinai, which is next to an oil well. What is the likelihood of facing a simultaneous hazmat disaster that overruns available hazmat resources, and what are its implications, if any?
Does anyone in our panel want to answer any of those questions?
I couldn't quite hear the first question. Can he repeat that first question?
Sure. One quick second. Let me make sure we are utilizing.
Stand by.
Please stand by. Is that clear? Can you hear me more clearly now?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Okay, let's go ahead.
How would major aftershocks affect responsiveness and supplies? For example, when looking back on the volcano eruption in New Zealand a few years ago, we saw that many organizations and agencies were hesitant to land on the island due to secondary eruptions and hazards. Could we see a similar kind of hesitation during a major earthquake here?
So what kind of supplies are you talking about? Are you talking about immediate supplies or food or water? What supplies? Because there's a different answer depending on what supplies you're talking about.
Personnel, food, water.
So-
We're talking a lot of people in LA, and we don't have the resources for it. So how are we gonna?
Yeah, so we have what we call, yeah, so we have every city is required to do a local hazard mitigation plan and continuity of operations. So what that entails is doing a study on supply chain management. And so supply chain management means finding locations outside of the risk zone. So what you're looking at is outside. So for our supply chain management, we look at like Riverside, San Bernardino County. So outside of what's the projected fault zones that are going to come through Los Angeles, and make sure that we have contracts or a supply chain plan in place to where we have medical supplies and water and all that that's going to be shipped in. And then we also have, as I mentioned, that training with the military, they can also bring it in through the coastal regions if we need to. So we practice all those kinds of different variables to bring in. How are we going to bring in supplies? How are we going to bring in medicine? And we also work with the military in case we need to drop things in. Inside our own, we talk about MPODs, medical points of distributions, or pods, points of distributions if we have to have water set up for people to come get gallons of water. So we have a couple of different answers to those questions of how we're going to distribute supplies. And for personnel, we have a disaster service worker program for the city of Los Angeles. So our employees, when they become any government employee, whether it's city, county, state, federal, you're automatically taken oath to become a disaster service worker, which means that you don't necessarily get to do your job. So for pandemic, many of our employees did different jobs that help support the pandemic effort. So even if, let's say we don't have it, we don't put them in things that they're not qualified for, but let's say we need someone to help administer cars as they go through to get their vaccination. Instead of being a receptionist at the convention center, you would go help direct cars. So we would activate the disaster service worker program and start realigning those roles to fill in the gaps. So there's a lot of different Within our planning cycles for as a city, we have a lot of different mitigating plans that we can help. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, yes.
That's
And
your first question. I don't remember what the second
the
question
second
was.
one was about oil wells and other hazards that we have, high risk era hazards that we have. Um, you know, we'll be facing, I know the hazmat teams are come out of downtown. Would that seems like there's a lot of oil wells all over the place in the basin, and it seems like to be well overrun should there be a major incident, and we'd be potentially left with not being good to access certain neighborhoods or like Cedar Sinai. I don't know if you're familiar. It's right across the street from a major oil well which had a methane explosion, 1984, whatever it was. So it's, what do you think about that?
And I know Rico probably has more information, but every hospital is required to do also a hazard assessment with their a local hazard mitigation assessment as well as like cities are. And every oil company is also required by law to inform the neighborhoods and the organizations like hospitals around them and provide funding for any kind of mitigation, sheltering in place, any kind of things like that. So areas like San Pedro, Wilmington, along with like hospitals and stuff, those oil companies, those refineries are mandated to go out and do information sharing, give resources, give tools, and also put in safeguards and retrofitting their refineries, their oil pipelines, and all of that, just like we do our buildings. I'm not a subject matter expert on it. That's all I know. I don't know very much more than that. And so I don't know if Rico or anybody else on the call has more information.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I can chime in on that for a really brief second if you guys can hear me okay.
We can hear you.
Yeah, so just real briefly, and number one, those are excellent questions. And I'm going to start small and I'm going to go big. Number one, that's why we're in this meeting tonight, for you to get more prepared. If you join Ryland, a lot of those identified critical infrastructure items that are hazardous to us, hazardous to you, hazardous to emergency responders, you're going to find out about that. And you're going to be able to make yourself much more resilient. And that's the number one goal for me for this meeting. The second goal is recruitment, to get you to actually join, unify, and make yourself even more of a force multiplier. On top of that, what Crisanta said, all of those facilities are required, especially living in California, to have operational readiness, preparedness, and actionable plans. And again, that is a fantastic question. And I told you I'd go big at the end. At the end of the day, if there is a major size earthquake or other seismic event, and we have a volcano in the area, we have oil wells going off, our immediate goal is going to be evacuation and the safety of the persons there. Regardless of the plans that are in place, it's to provide for the safety first. Remember, when I go to a building that's on fire and it's a 5-story building and floors 3 and 4 are on fire, I'm getting everyone out. I'm moving you to a safe location. Hopefully we can effect a rescue to everyone, but that situation has exceeded anyone's capacity because now that building is beyond anyone's reasonable accommodations to be able to live there any further. We're going to have the same thing with disasters. We will be overwhelmed at a certain point. It's the unfortunate reality of living on this planet. And I don't mean to say that in jest. I mean that as a reality. That's why I love wearing this uniform, because I'm willing to risk all of it to save, but definitely triage to get my people safe first. Hopefully that answers your question. Those issues that you mentioned, they're very well known, especially because there were some large causalities there. And we do regular drills around those wells, pipelines, and I can name about any area in the city that we've practiced and drilled upon. But again, those are for first response, taking care of the most amount of people, doing the most amount of good in a certain time frame, and really at the end of the day, empowering and building that resiliency in you folks.
All right. Thanks, Captain Gross. Martin, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Good evening. Well presented tonight from all our presenters. Thank you very much. My question is this: we've recently come out of a situation which we seem to have not really anticipated in the San Bernardino Mountains. And the response in those areas, to say the least, was slow in getting going and is still an ongoing situation. Taking that into account, does the EOC and the fire department take a look at their disaster response plans and look at those unique situations that we don't often encounter and reassess how they're going to respond? We've spoken about oil wells and gas pipelines and things like that. We haven't really had any major blowouts in Los Angeles, but should we have that, and then a cascading disaster with a hazardous transportation spill coupled with the inability from infrastructure to allow resources to get to areas, are we looking at those unique situations and looking for ways to mitigate those in a reassessment program that's ongoing?
So if Rico, if you don't mind, I'll start. So I spoke a little bit about our training and then our planning division. So the planning division, as I mentioned, they oversee the emergency operations plan for the city of Los Angeles, and that contains 42 annexes. So of those 42 annexes, it's a lot of what you're talking about, Martin. It's the cybersecurity annex, it's the multi-attack annex, such as we saw historically in Paris. It's the earthquake annex, it's the large-scale disaster where we might have to group everybody into a stadium annex. You know, it's a cold weather annex, such as we're seeing now, this Pineapple Express. So we have all these. What we didn't have was a global pandemic that caught us by surprise. So now we're writing that annex. But what we found is that we're never gonna capture. We're up to 42 plans, right? We're up to 42 annexes. We're never gonna capture the okey doke. But what we found as we're writing these annexes is that the expertise of the LA Fire Department and the expertise of the LAPD and the expertise of the LA Department of Transportation and the expertise of the Department of Recreation and Parks and their sheltering and their Department Operations Center, the expertise, the level of expertise that you have in your city agencies when they respond to disasters is ranked at the top of this nation. So regardless of how many things come at us, we are very adept at identifying and pivoting. So we don't always go by the book. The book tells us 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, and we understand that those are our steps, and we repeat them over and over because we've done it for wildfires, back-to-back wildfires for 3 years, and then we did it for the pandemic back-to-back for 3 years, and then we do it for this weather. Now we've done it back-to-back for 3 months. So we have muscle memory on how we work together and how we come together to do these things. But when we need to pivot, we pivot very well. We take 16, 17 agencies and we all pivot like a team. So do we try and think outside the box? Sure. When we exercise, we throw weird things in there, and then we throw it in there as an inject, and we're like, okay, what happens if a drone? What happens if it's not a car bomb? What if it's a drone with a bomb that comes down? What if the zoo gates get open and the lions get out? Yes. Do we get those weird? Yeah, of course. We throw them in there into our exercises. We try and think outside the box, and then we all talk about it. Okay, well, you know what? What if a volcano erupts? What if a plane crashes into City Hall? We do throw those injects in there, and we try and think about those things. But I can guarantee you the level of professionalism and the level of expertise for the city of Los Angeles is bar none. And I can say that with 100% sincerity. So we take a look at those plans on a 2-year cycle. So every 2 years, we take 3 or 4 plans and we're reviewing them line by line. And we have every department that's involved in that plan has to come to a meeting month after month. For 12 months, they're going line by line and they're going through to make sure that they're correct. And then as they're reviewing that plan, the training group is creating a training, whether it's a workshop, a tabletop exercise, a full-scale exercise. And then every department has to go to that. And then the general managers have to go to that. And then the executive board has to train to that. So we're training at all levels. So I feel confident in saying that we're trying everything we can to make sure that whatever you throw at us, whatever curveball you got, we're going to hit it out of the park.
Thank you, Crisanta. I know that there will now be lions in my next pop-up drill. I think that's Studio City, if anyone's on from there. Nancy, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Hi there. Thank you to everybody who presented. It was a wonderful presentations. My question is, I am looking at the CERT 360, and there's a whole bunch of good stuff there that I'd really like to participate in, except that it's going to overlap. So my question is, will we ever be offering those things here in LA?
Yeah, I'll jump on that one really quick. And thank you for that question. The CERT 360, as you guys know, is in the end of June, beginning of July this year up in San Jose or Burlingame. Really encourage you, if you're interested in CERT at all, make your way up there because it's a large group of courses that you could take at one time. That being said, because it's in California, the anticipation is that the event's going to be much larger than a local or even one that's out of state conference because of the amount of the amount of interest, the amount of people that are available to take those courses. Unfortunately, that comes with a caveat. You can't take all the classes. Like literally, I would love to be in 10 different courses. Unfortunately, I will be working during that conference, most likely, at the conference to make it more enjoyable for the participants, right? So go on FEMA's website, go on Cal OES's website. There's 3 other very good, if you want to email me, you can, websites and organizations, EMI, Emergency Managers Institute, Cal OES's CTSI, that offer those courses. They're every level. Some of them you could take at home. Some of them you can take up at the state and in between. If you want to go to Florida and take a class, you can take it. At the end of the day, yes, the CERT conference, you will only be able to take certain classes, but for the cost of admission, those classes are free. Some of those courses cost $1,000 or more to take on their own. And that's the huge benefit about going up there. And then you can collaborate, network, and really develop those resources that we really need as a team, as Crisanta mentioned. We need to be a team.
If you do make it up to the CERT conference, make sure you attend the karaoke and make sure that Captain Gross gets a couple beers. He becomes really fun when he's singing.
I don't even drink. I don't know what that means. I'm okay. All right. Any more questions?
Roger, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. I'm in a CERT team in Northern California, and the question came up, has LA CERT added to their training how to run and or work in a disaster shelter?
Yes.
Excellent. So that one word answer is that means that if Red Cross doesn't show up at a particular site, your team can open and operate that shelter individually?
Is there any Red Cross on the call right now? Yes. No, I'm kidding. There's
Sorry,
certain
what
provisions
was
with,
the question? Sorry.
yeah, the question was is if Red Cross doesn't show up. So we're a little bit different. We're very unique, even though we have a very well-versed call out team and volunteers, even spontaneous volunteers. Captain Gates and I can call those people out and organize them. That being said, we have a very defined program for sheltering, mass care feeding animals. There's so many layers to that. If Red Cross isn't there, it might go to law enforcement. If law enforcement isn't there, it might go to another agency. All of those at one of the Crescenta, what is it, 1,600 rec and park facility sites. And that's not including, like we said, the high schools, the schools that also have provisions, even though we don't want to take away from them because we want them to get back up and running. We have another layer there. And so our CERT teams might assist, but at the end of the day, they already have enough people. Now, out of county and out of the area, even some of our local partners, beachside cities, they would require some help from our CERT because their numbers aren't as high. We have to know that, and we have to network and be able to support those other facilities. But Los Angeles, we have a lot of help. It's very organized. And when we open up a shelter, and it happens pretty often, I'll put it in perspective. If you guys see a fire in a habitational type building within Los Angeles, they are probably being housed for a little bit of time at one of your local shelters, staffed by Red Cross or law enforcement or other, ran by Rec and Park, assisted with EMD from the council district's office to the mayor's office. It's pretty cool to see. Sorry, long explanation too. Yes, there's a lot of layers. I wish I could send my CERT people there. I do. But typically they're like, hey, Cap, they got it over here. We're going to go back to the scene of the fire and help the people on site.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Carolyn.
I will add, Roger, that we do use CERT a lot at the local assistance centers. So when we set up a local assistance center, we do ask for help from the CERT members.
Excellent.
All right, Cynthia, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Yes, I don't know if there's anyone else named Cynthia, but I guess I'm the one.
Yes.
I am a former insurance agent, and my question is about older buildings that have not been retrofitted to the current modern standards in LA. Public buildings or parking structures. Should we know any about those, just in case we happen to be going to LA for any events?
I am unfortunately not. I have no knowledge of that. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Kind of a good question, kind of a mixed bag question. Meaning, if we're visiting LA, and I'm going to put Rico's dad hat on for a second and big brother hat, you should always be prepared. I have a go bag in my car. I have supplies, so if I need to walk home, I can get home. And unfortunately, if that building has some type of damage, before I walk into it, I've probably identified escape exits, how I'm going to, hide if I need to hide in that type of event, multiple causalities. Yes, I walk around like that, but I think we all should. I think it's something that really will prepare us. But at the end of the day, it'd be very difficult for us to walk into any LA building and know whether it is sufficient. That being said, again, there are multiple layers that building cannot operate unless it's per fire code. So to answer your question directly, how would you figure it out? You can look up any building on LAFD or excuse me, of the city. And you can go to LAFD fire prevention and research that building, structure, or other. There's typically not a full digestible amount of information. However, that building's compliance, that building's safety standards, when it was built, who the owners are, you could find that information relatively quickly and very quickly ascertain if this is a building that you think is suspect, risky. Again, these are types of things as firefighters we do every day. We drive our districts, we take a look around to which their age, type, hazards, safety systems, safety measures, fire alarms, how we're getting in, how we're getting out, which door RICO has to break down to be able to mitigate the incident and get you out to safety. So good question, kind of a mixed bag. But yes, there are ways you can look into it, but I better prepare myself.
Well, I read the Washington Post, and according to the Washington Post, there are a number of older buildings that are not up to earthquake standard for modern, what's considered the modern building code for earthquakes.
Yeah, and real quick, just in sake of everybody's time, again, mixed bag kind of a statement, because depending on when that building was built or constructed, the changes in seismic retrofits happen sometimes annually, right? They're pretty periodic. So an older building thus then is already out of parameters. Now, if you drive around LA, and I know the 2023 retrofits that were in hospitals, apartment buildings, and habitated buildings, they took effect and they are all over the place. So you can just drive around almost any neighborhood of Los Angeles and you're going to see a building that's being seismically retrofitted. Sometimes it takes time, but yes, I would say that that statement's accurate, but contextually, it's a little bit difficult for me to put a parameter on that.
Thanks, Captain. Terry, go ahead and unmute and ask your question. Terry, we can't hear you. Go ahead and unmute.
Did it work? Okay,
There you
fine. I just wanted to thank everybody for tonight, but also I just got back from Christchurch, New Zealand, where they had a 7.8. It was 11 years ago. And earlier, the presenter was saying about the showing those pictures of like with the liquefaction where the from the Marina Del Rey. I'm very close to it. I'm like 6 blocks out of it. And anyways, the pictures that he was showing, like how, you know, things would move, and he was talking about retrofitting my house. I am thinking about doing that because what we saw, the destruction over there was incredible. But I wanted to just share that you don't really realize what it really looks like, an aftermath of something like that, until you can actually physically see it. And now after seeing something like that, I mean, yes, to see the things on Turkey, we know that those building codes are not up to ours. But to see what happened over there in New Zealand, and they have pretty good building codes, but what was the scariest part was there was miles of where the ocean floor literally was lifted about 300 feet. And it actually came up to the road that we were driving on and had wiped out the road. And so hopefully that something like that wouldn't happen here in the marina, but it's just something to consider, like how the roads could be completely, I mean, literally lifted. I mean, I couldn't believe it. The rocks were protruding like 300 feet above sea level where they used to be from a 7.8 earthquake. So I just thought, you know, I'd kind of throw that out there about getting around the city. We may need those bicycles and a good pair of tennis shoes in your cars.
Thank you, Terry. Yeah. Unfortunately, to predict all of the possible things that will go wrong during an earthquake, it's impossible. And we learn every single time there's a disaster somewhere in the world. Okay, Patty, go ahead and I'm sorry, Patricia. Sorry.
No, Patty's fine. That's just the official name. I'm mostly just referring back to the Red Cross stuff. I'm an old Red Cross instructor, and when I took CERT back in 1988, it was highly recommended that we take also the Red Cross disaster preparedness classes, which is mass care, sheltering, feeding, etc., to coincide with our CERT program. This was in the late 80s, early 90s. And as far as I know, they still have those classes, and I would highly recommend that. But the other thing we have to remember is that all these people who run the shelters from Red Cross or any other organization will be affected to the point where they may not be able to get to you or to a shelter. But also remember that the shelters may be damaged. For instance, I'm close to Mar Vista Park. You know, it might be rubble. So a shelter there will have to move to another place. So none of this is going to happen quickly. That's the same thing happened in the mountains. Due to the volume of snow, things don't happen quickly. So we not only as hopefully, ideally, helper people, but also as residents need to be patient and be prepared for ourselves, take care of ourselves. That's just the way it is. It may take a while. That's all.
Yeah. Thank you, Patty. And that there was a question in the chat earlier about San Bernardino and where was the government, and the answer was they were there. They had an insurmountable amount of work to get through, and it took time. And they had to bring in the correct resources, and it took time to get those resources there. And there's a whole lot of complication that nobody anticipated, and nobody could have anticipated. So unfortunately, it's not going to happen as fast as you'd like it to. And that's the reality. Cynthia. Cynthia, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Okay, yes, I'm asking another question now, or actually a statement. As a former insurance agent during the Northridge earthquake, a lot of the claims had to do with broken glass. And after that earthquake, I did a class and found out that what you need to do in your home to prepare for an earthquake on the inside of your home is just as important as the structure of your home. So you need to use earthquake wax when you have a lot of breakable things in an earthquake area so they, they don't move.
I think it's called museum wax.
Well, I don't know. You can go to Home Depot and it's called earthquake wax and ask them. They should know what it is. And also, you need to make sure that any major appliances or mirrors or whatever you have are fixed to the wall. You could ask them in Home Depot or something like Lowe's or something if they have any retrofitting. Actually, I don't know what it's called, retrofitting, or my husband does it, so I don't know. He makes sure,
strapping.
Yes, strapping it to the wall. So if you even have a very large, heavy cabinet, you want to strap that to the wall. You want to strap anything that's huge or can fall over and harm someone. If you have mirrors, you want to make sure that you don't just have them on a simple hook or something. You want to make sure that they're fixed to the wall. With Home Depot would be able to tell you how to do that. That's probably the most important thing I learned from the Northridge earthquake, is that most people did not use earthquake wax. I had one client that had of course, a lot of injuries from broken glass because also, oh, I forgot to tell you, also, if you have kitchen cabinets, you need to put those little, I don't know what it's called, I guess toddler fix, little, I can't think of what it's called.
I think they're called earthquake safety catches, something like
Yeah,
that. They'll prevent your cabinets from opening up and spilling on your plates and knives.
Exactly. Yes, and they use them for toddlers. I notice a lot of people do that, so the toddlers can't easily open up kitchen cabinets. But
And one thing that you actually you should probably also do is have a pair of closed-toed shoes under your bed, because chances are there will be a lot of broken stuff on your floor, and if you're rushing to get to your children, you're not going to care about that. However, as you cut up your feet, it's going to limit your ability to do anything after. So having those closed-toed shoes under your bed, put them on before you start going through your home. That's going to save you a lot. And
that's
a lot
very
of
important.
right.
Somebody put in the chat
Thank you,
that
Cynthia.
it's called child locks for your cabinets.
Child lock.
But if you have prevention done beforehand, you're going to be in a better situation.
Thank you, Cynthia. Lori actually had her hand up and dropped it, and I missed her earlier. So, Lori, go ahead.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I just signed up for the one on Butler. It's 2 hours. What can you possibly learn in 2 hours? What is like the next step?
Are you talking about the CERT class?
Yeah. Is that my next step? I've never really taken any training.
Oh, you're talking about the refresher. So the refresher is actually, I don't know if you are. Hold on. So the classes are 2.5 hours and there's 7 classes long. So you do have to attend all 7 to get your certificate of participation. But every class covers a different topic, and that's why it's 7 classes long.
Got it. And that's under the CERT website.
Yes.
Thank you.
A real quick point on that, if you do miss a course and you need to jump in a different class, we can assist you with that as well, Miss Lauren.
You can make up at another location. Roger, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. Just a quick update on the San Bernardino rescue mission. What part did the CERT teams in Southern California play in that? And how is the mission itself doing at this point in time?
I don't have an answer for you on that. I know that we had a couple teams go up, or a couple members go up as community members or volunteers to help out, but they didn't operate under LAFD CERT. They went and volunteered for the local organization. I know they went door to door checking on people. So it's each locality, each municipality is going to deal with the emergency differently, and how they utilize their volunteers will be different. So how LA City does it, how San Bernardino does it will be two different ways entirely.
Okay. What is the rescue mission kind of winding down now, or what?
No. Okay, I'll talk on that before I have to jump off, and I apologize, everybody. I wanted to address this though, because it brings up another critical point. When you take those classes, like was just asked about taking 1 class, 2 classes, or 3 classes, that really gives you the tools. So can you accomplish something in 2.5 hours? Absolutely. Those are going to be monumental tools in your toolbox. So if something like San Bernardino is happening right now, to answer that question, and you are able to assist and get up there and provide that support, do it. That being said, the members that went up, they're LAFD CERT team members, and they went on their own time and volunteered. They were able to join with the relief efforts with the fire department. That is pretty unique. They were lucky to be able to get up there. The problem with that area, and someone brought it up earlier, is they're isolated. There's very limited opportunity for us to be able to assist. And I'll put it in perspective. Right now, we have significant weather conditions in Los Angeles. We have several communities that, because of runoff, become isolated. We will post fire companies and law enforcement in those communities for a short time. It's not sustainable long time. That being said, we want to make sure they are safe. San Bernardino fire and the inundated areas from the snowfall, they had already sent extra resources, supplies up there. For us to go and join those efforts immediately, we would have become the problem. Very similar to what Patrick was saying, was you have to take care of yourself first before you engage. We can't allow us as volunteers to become the problem. But like those members that made it up there and were the example, they were able to go up, unify, and assist. And at the end of the day, they were released because the existing agency's ability was now able to go in and help out. Does that mean there's no tragedy? No, it's not. That doesn't mean that. We're still going to have tragedy. What I'm saying is get the training, apply it after you make sure you're safe, but be organized and diligent. We know and we've seen people respond somewhat regardless of their own health and safety to certain scenarios, only to get hurt themselves. We don't want to bring victims to the incident, but we want to be prepared for when they open that door and let us in, we're in there. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Captain, and thank you for all of our panelists for this. I do want to note, let me correct something I said. The volunteers that went up, they got permission to go up. So they didn't just go on their own, and that's one of the critical things is you don't self-deploy with CERT. So they actually reached out to the fire department up there, and one of them lived in that, has a house up there. That's why it was so critical that he wanted to help his own neighbors. But he got permission, special permission to go up there. As Captain Gross said, if we just go and help, we become the problem. So it's all about helping your immediate neighbors. And then if you have additional skills, reach out to the companies or organizations that are helping, get in contact with them and go through their resources and their permission system. And they're going to direct you how to help out if you want to help outside of your area. All right. I apologize for this going long. I do like to try and keep these to time.
Patrick, can I just,
Oh,
I just
yeah.
wanted to wish Ben Park an early happy birthday. Happy early birthday, Ben. We share a birthday, so I know it's going to be his birthday soon because it's going to be my birthday soon. So happy birthday, Ben.
Happy birthday, Crisanta. And can I get a round of applause for Crisanta and Rico? And Mark has already jumped off, but thank you everyone for coming out. Thank you to our panelists, Crisanta, Rico, Mark. I think, I hope a lot of people got this. Like I said, we had a high of 290 people between the Zoom and YouTube channels. So I think, and most stayed on until the Q&A, and then we had people dropping off, but it was very well attended. So thank you to our presenters. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me, laftcertcentral@gmail.com. I did put it in the chat a few times. And I can send your questions on and get you answers if I don't have the answers for you. Have a good night, everyone. And we do this every third Wednesday of the month. And I don't know what the training will be for next month, but hopefully it'll be just as good as this one. Have a good night, everyone.